Folks, the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade is looking like an absolute steal. And no, not for the LA Kings, but actually the Winnipeg Jets. Just a few months after the huge blockbuster Pierre-Luc Dubois deal between the LA Kings and the Winnipeg Jets, we're starting to see the ramifications of this deal. And it is not looking too pretty for the LA Kings right now. But what has happened to Pierre-Luc Dubois this season, and how has this trade become such a win for the Winnipeg Jets? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we break down every part of this trade to see what's next, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this as we lead up to the trade deadline where you won't want to miss a thing. Now, before we get into why this trade has become so crazy, let's first talk about today's sponsor in Underdog Fantasy. My favorite and soon to be your favorite place to play daily fantasy sports. Today, I'm actually going to go through 3 different picks. The first one, I got Dylan Strome higher than 2.0 shots. He's been really feeling it lately, especially in the shot department. I think he's going to go off versus Philly. I also got higher than 0.5 points with Shane Gostisbehere as a spicy pick. I think he's going to do it very solid versus Carolina too. And then I got higher than 3.5 shots with John Tavares. He's been just racking him up recently. I think he's going to be having a heater versus Columbus as well. So we'll see how this one goes. And for all you guys that have never tried it before as well, Underdog Fantasy is giving you guys a special offer and an 100% match on your deposit up to $100. This is not something you'll want to miss. And for all you guys new to Underdog, you'll also get a free pick'em to pair with any other player. Plus, Underdog is operational in 30 plus states as well as multiple provinces in Canada. So go in the description, click on the link, sign up to Underdog Fantasy using promo code GRAV to make watching NHL hockey even more fun. And thank you to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's video. Now, going back to the discussion of the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, it was fascinating last night seeing the Jets and the Kings going at it in LA. This game was rocking, especially since throughout this game, it really had the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade all over it. The first was not going the Winnipeg Jets' way, and the LA Kings would continue to pour it on after the 1-0 goal. Dubois winning a battle and Lafreniere coming in to make it 2-0. Now, Dubois would get an assist on this play, but it was really mostly Lafreniere, especially below the goal line, somehow making this goal happen. But against Winnipeg, he does get an assist and is up on the scoreboard 2-0. But then in the second period, Gabe Vilardi, one of the big pieces in the Dubois trade for Winnipeg, really started to get cooking. You can see the Kings were in the Jets zone, but Gabe Vilardi increases the tension and forces the turnover, goes right up the ice into the zone, and Nikolai Ehlers does what he does best. The Vilardi and Ehlers connection wouldn't stop there, though. Continuing in the second with 6 minutes left, great outlet pass to Ehlers, and again, that speed just so good. And Vilardi, who only recently just became healthy again, already makes it a tied game with 2 primary assists. But this line kept going in the same exact period, and really only a minute later, they're already starting to create chaos again. Ehlers comes with a shot, Vilardi is able to win the battle, keep the puck loose, and Scheifele puts it home. So another primary assist for Gabe Vilardi. Now we go into the third period. It's 3-2 Winnipeg with 3 primary assists. Vilardi decides to get a goal for himself. Shot by DeMello and Vilardi. What a backhander. And now it's 4-2. Scheifele would end up getting the empty netter to make it 5-2 with, what do you know, the Vilardi, Scheifele, and Ehlers line on the ice, because of course it was. This line scored every goal of the game for the Winnipeg Jets and would lead them to a commanding 5-2 victory, and really Vilardi was a humongous part of it, not even just the assists and the points and everything. He looked completely at home, and against LA got some massive revenge in LA. And of course, now we turn our attention on to the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade, which funnily enough, for how successful LA season has been so far, Dubois really hasn't been a massive part of that. In fact, he's probably been the most disappointing part of this Kings season. When you look at it at age 25, it's not completely surprising that he's been slow to start with his new team, but it's kind of been concerning at this point. In 26 games, he has 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points, got that primary assist on the Lafreniere goal, but wasn't really a huge part of the play. Lafreniere was really the guy creating everything on that play and really gave Dubois the assist. So it really should be 11 points in 26 games. And for the player that we're talking about here, a player that got 63 points in 73 games last year, was supposed to be entering his prime, especially in LA system, it's been rough to watch. Dubois, to me, was always a player that was a little bit more limiting than I think a lot of people gave him credit for, and in Winnipeg's system, he was able to really bounce off a lot of great players, especially on the power play, but I also thought was a player that needed to show more in LA than what he had shown in the past, and so far, I think we're kind of seeing the worst version of Dubois, a little bit more of a careless player, that hasn't really been able to put in the effort shift by shift that you'd want. This is a player, though, that has all the skill, all the smarts to be able to do the right things, but he's just not not been able to put up these great games for LA, and especially around this King system that has done so well. If their first line wasn't going as great as it was, I think Dubois would get even more criticism. And then we go back to the actual trade itself here, where the Winnipeg Jets ended up getting Gabriel Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a 2024 second round pick, which is Montreal's, which is nothing to slouch at. Even though Montreal has overachieved this year, that's going to be a second round pick, likely inside the top 10 of the second round. So a fantastic haul at the time, and especially considering the leverage that Winnipeg got, it's turned into a blessing undisguised. We have to remember that especially back then, Dubois was basically forcing himself out. He didn't have much of a contract situation with Winnipeg, and it was known that he wanted to go to Montreal. He wanted to go to a big market, and Winnipeg really had no choice but to trade him. And we saw that lack of leverage that Winnipeg had, but all things considered, they did about as good as they could have. And even at the time, I thought this trade package for Winnipeg was excellent. I thought Gabriel Vilardi was going to be an instant player for the Jets, and even though he's dealt with some injuries, he's starting to really find his game, and I think he will have a fantastic second half of this season. Alex Iafallo has been great for Winnipeg so far in a dual threat role, a guy that can put up some great defensive numbers, can look good as well on the rush too. And you got Kupari, who has been injured up to this point with Winnipeg, has had some decent games, but hasn't been able to put it all together. And a second round pick. And all things considered, especially with how Dubois is playing, it's been a steal of a deal for Winnipeg. When you just look at the points and look at Dubois' production with 12 points in 26 games, you then compare it to everybody else that Winnipeg was able to collect in the trade. And you got, of course, Gabriel Vilardi, who has dealt with some injuries up to this point, but I think when he is healthy, can be a premier top six centerman. You look this year in 10 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, obviously inflated on from that fantastic game versus LA, but this is a player that will start to find his footing and will be the premier piece in the trade for the Jets and will be a top six centerman, will replace Dubois' role, and already has. And hey, even if you play him on the wing like they did with Scheifele and Ehlers, obviously that works too. So you can have him in a dual position game and still get good results from him as well. And then you got Alex Iafallo, who was the more, I guess, instant player for the Jets. He's looked pretty good for them as well. And you can see the addition there in 28 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. He hasn't been explosive or anything, but as a 30, 40, 50 point guy that can put up some good defensive numbers, that is what Iafallo is at this point. But another piece of the puzzle, if it was Vilardi and Kupari in a second, that would be a lot different. But that added piece in Iafallo, that depth lost by LA, it hasn't exactly hurt LA so far, but the Jets are really benefiting from it. And then you got Rasmus Kupari, who hasn't been much of a factor with Winnipeg so far, but he is still 23 years old, and you can see in 15 games has 0 goals, 1 assist for 1 point, but is also more of a defensive player, just like Alex Iafallo as well. And I think he's especially being the youngest player involved in this trade, will be somebody that will have to adjust in the new system. I mean, he was drafted by LA. He has been developing with LA and kind of got his whole situation uprooted. But I think Kupari will be in a good situation in the second half once he's healthy as well, once he starts to get more game reps and looks better within that, inside that bottom 6. But for the Jets, you get a top 6 player, really 2 top 6 players. Iafallo, I think, can be second line caliber at times. A guy like Kupari, who could be a solid 4th liner, and a second rounder for Dubois. I mean, Dubois is playing like a 3rd liner right now, and the fact that Winnipeg has gotten this much depth back and a solid second rounder too, they're coming out gangbusters in this deal. If you look at their pick situation too, and they upgraded from their own second round pick, getting Montreal's as well. And I think Winnipeg has done a really good job keeping their own picks being reserved in the right situations, because they didn't need to go for it last year, even though they made the playoffs. This year, we'll see if they end up trading for anybody, but I would not be surprised if they end up keeping their first round pick. But Winnipeg is slowly developing a pretty underrated prospect pool. And with this kind of retool, especially trading Dubois, even though they've kept in the core with Scheifele and Hellebuyck being signed long term, I think they've done a really good job prospect wise of slowly building up that prospect pool and having options in the future. And the trade gave them even more options with Vilardi, Iafallo, and Kupari all being brought in. And you look at it too in the recent draft profiles, Cole Perfetti is looking fantastic for them. Chaz Lucius has developed a little bit slowly, but I do think Nikita Chibrikov can be a solid guy for them, potentially as well. Dmitry Kuzmin as well. In the 2022 draft, McGrody and Lambert, a fantastic first round. And Elias Salomonsson is looking very good for them too. You also got in the last draft as well, Colby Barlow, who started a little bit slow in the OHL this year, but I think will eventually get back back to his game. And of course, you have their likely first-round pick this year. And with the way the Jets are drafting, especially in the first round, I think they've done a pretty good job, maybe besides Chaz Lucius. But all in all, I think they've done very solidly and will get somebody that could factor in maybe AD in this next draft. But that's what happens when you keep your picks, especially in Winnipeg's position. They're going to have a pretty young team here coming up. When we look back at that Dubois trade and what it's been able to give Winnipeg, and again, it's just created so much more depth for them. You got Vilardi and you got Iafallo right now on the right wing. You got players like Nemestikov playing so well in their roles. Nino Niederreiter has been a revelation for them and is playing to his prime years, which is great to see. And you, of course, got Cole Perfetti playing at a great level. Scheifele been fantastic this year offensively. And you got players defensively like Adam Lowry and Gustafsson that can put in their own and have really good positions in their roles. And Winnipeg, it's not hard to see why they're doing so well, especially in the Central, which has just a lot of middling rosters. Winnipeg has a lot of guys still in their prime, still putting up great numbers, and that's really propelled them in a big way. And we've seen some massive improvements in the defensive game for Winnipeg, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Of course, with the Dubois trade, and to me, I don't think Dubois is the greatest defensive player. You bring in Vilardi and Iafallo, who put up great defensive numbers in the past, and it's not surprising to see this big defensive turnaround. Sure, it hasn't been a day one thing, but I think for Winnipeg, they've improved in a lot of key areas that they really needed to become a much more solidified playoff contender, and I think the Dubois trade has been a big part of that. It will be really interesting to see how Dubois does develop, though, in LA, because I do think he is better than what he has shown. I think the effort level should be better at this point, but we'll see if that's able to turn around, if he's able to get a little bit more adjusted to LA system and more really accountable system than what he had before in his other NHL teams. LA is a super concise team, and I think with Dubois, he's going to have to turn that page, going to have to get used to it eventually, because right now he's just not really playing well. He's been one of the less effective players on the entire team, especially in the role that he's been given, and it's not really surprising to see those middling results so far. But I do expect Dubois to eventually turn the corner, eventually be much better than he has been, but it is definitely concerning to see, especially for a player that was supposed to be the heir to the throne, to Kopitar perhaps, supposed to be their next first-line center. If Byfield's not able to truly transition, it's been really scary to see how he's done with LA, because really, again, throughout their entire roster, for the most part, Dubois has been the biggest, most inconsistent player. So hopefully in the end, this is a trade that is able to be a win-win. At least at the time, I thought it was a win-win for both teams, solidifying that center group for LA, but also for Winnipeg, bringing on so much more depth and getting a little bit younger as well with both Kupari and Gabe Vilardi, who I thought was going to be a massive part of the deal. Even though Vilardi's season did not start off the best way, getting injured versus LA and having all the troubles to start, hopefully he'll finally be able to start to turn that page and get some consistency in the second half for Winnipeg, because I think he's going to be a crucial player for the future for this team in a big way. And it's great to see him have a great performance versus LA and really get the ground running. And of course, you got Iafallo and hopefully Kupari healthy soon too. And Winnipeg's looking in a great position here as well. And with Montreal probably regressing, especially in this second half, that second round pick is going to look even more juicy. So I didn't really expect to say this, but the future in Winnipeg actually looks pretty bright with the prospects they've been able to bring up and the prospect pool getting better and better. With Winnipeg, they've been able to strike a decent balance between still being a contending team and still having a lot of hope for the future with the younger guys they have. And once players like Barlow and Lambert and McGrody come up, the Winnipeg Jets are going to have even more options. Though I think this next draft, they will likely go for a D. We'll see what ends up happening. Winnipeg has been a pretty unpredictable team at the draft recently, so we'll see what they end up going for. But recently, they've had a pretty good track record, and still selecting Brad Lambert was a slam dunk. We'll see how it all works out, though. But for Winnipeg, they're looking like big winners in the Dubois trade. We'll see if LA is able to still be a winner. But right now, Winnipeg's looking like they're stealing it from the LA Kings. But let me know what you guys think about this Pierre-Luc Dubois trade and how it has resulted just a few months later. Who do you think is going to come out the winners of this deal? Is it going to be LA? Is it going to be Winnipeg? Let us know all your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell if you haven't already, and share the video with all the Jets, all the LA Kings fans out there that you guys know online, and click on this card for all my trade content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great hockey day, and I will see you. Goodbye.